Hello. Yesterday I was out here, I shot a video explaining how to check your chain slack, and I found out that mine was right at the upper limit of what's acceptable for slack. So I'm gonna shoot a little video tightening my chain today. To tighten your chain, your wheel is gonna need to come back, and on both sides you have some adjuster bolts. So we're going to end up backing out those bolts to tighten the chain. First step is going to be loosening up your rear axle nut here. There's a cotter pin there, but in my case it's smashed down enough and stuff that I don't have to worry about that. My socket fits right over, or you could just use a wrench. I should be able to break this loose enough and move the wheel without having to remove that cotter pin. You don't have to take the nut completely off. Once you barely break that nut loose, this side will probably start spinning, and you might need the nut to be a little bit looser so you can grab like a wrench or a socket or something, just so you can back that nut off a little bit further. Now that the rear axle is loose, the tire can move back, so you'll loosen up this lock nut here so you can move your adjuster bolt. Loosen right up. Then you'll start loosening this bolt, which will back it out farther, which will in turn move your wheel back. And you have those little notches right here that you'll want to take note of to see where you're starting at. So mine, these two lines are lined up, the first two here. So I'll back it up just a little bit, maybe between these first two lines. That first one, the second one. And then I'll go around to this other side and do the exact same thing. Loosen up your lock nut here, back off this bolt, and make sure that you're in the same exact spot between these notches. Wherever you are, make sure it's identical to the other side. Alright, so I actually barely had to back mine out. Initially, this little notch here was right in front of this line, and now it's like maybe right behind that. So I barely backed out the adjuster bolts on both sides, and then I checked my chain slack, and now it's perfect. And now I'll just lock these lock nuts back up, tighten them a little bit. And another thing I'm going to note is mine are moving so easy in and out, the bolts and the nuts, and that's not always the case. A lot of times the aluminum gets like corroded and it's really hard to get these out. I had KX112 before that it busted off in there, and I ended up having to drill it out and get a helicoil kit. So one of the first things I did when I got this bike was I actually took these adjuster bolts out of both sides, and I have it's kind of brown here, you can tell that's anti-seize. I put anti-seize on these bolts, then put them back in, because it just makes this so much easier for when you have to adjust your chain. So if you ever get these bolts out or you're ever adjusting your chain, it's a good idea to put some kind of oil or anti-seize or something on there to make it easier on you in the future. Now it's time to just tighten back up the rear axle nut. And just make sure while you're tightening it up, I put a little bit of pressure on the rear tire, pushing it forward to make sure that this stays up against the head of that bolt. Because I mean, this is loose, so your tire, now there's a gap between there, can actually come back a little bit. So you want to make sure that's pressed up all the way against the bolts while you're tightening it down, because that's the exact spot you want your rear axle to keep that tension that you just set on your chain. I always like to go by the torque specs, so I'm tightening down my rear axle with my torque wrench here, and this is a KX112 2025. I have my torque set to 59 foot-pounds or 80 Newton meters. That's what my service manual says. That's it. Once you have that rear axle torqued down, I come back and I kind of look on both sides and just double check that after tightening it, that the rear axle's still back to the same spot on both sides, and I measure my chain slack one last time. Thanks for watching. Hopefully it was helpful, and if you have any questions or comments or tips, leave them below.